I know one of the things that every man who's addicted to porn deeply wants is inner freedom from the addiction. Not just, okay, I want to create my environment so I never come into contact with porn. I want to be able to go anywhere and not have to worry about what I see, because I know that even if there's porn right in front of me, it's not going to tempt me because I have that inner peace within. That's what we all really want, is that inner freedom, not just the outer freedom. My guest today is myself. Last week, I was interviewed by Taylor Chambers on the Porn Resilient Marriage Summit, a 3-day event with many experts in the field of addiction, recovery, and relationships. And today we are sharing that interview with you. In this episode, we cover the role of mindfulness in recovery, the science of neuroplasticity, the importance of community and why you need real accountability, and the nuanced role of shame in recovery. This was honestly a very fun and engaging conversation for me to participate in, and Taylor is an excellent interviewer, so I'm sure you'll get a ton out of this conversation as well. So, without further ado, please enjoy this conversation between myself and Taylor Chambers.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi, I'm Jeremy Lipkowitz, and with over 12 years of meditation experience as a mindfulness trainer and coach for high performers, I've become obsessed with helping people break free from compulsive, unhealthy behaviors and addictions and step into a life of true freedom so that they can finally become their best selves and cultivate deeper and lasting fulfillment. I've created Unhooked, the Breaking Porn Addiction podcast, to give you simple, actionable, step-by-step strategies to master your mind and optimize your life. This is Unhooked.
Hey, hello friends, Taylor Chambers here. Welcome to this segment of the Porn Resilient Marriage. I'm joined today by Jeremy. I should have asked the pronunciation. Lipkowitz. Is that decent?
You got it right.
Okay,
Yeah.
right. I want to make sure I get that. So, Jeremy and I have been familiar with each other's work, and so I'm really excited that we get to connect today. Today, we're going to be talking specifically about mindfulness and how that really, I guess you would say, reinforces or even undergirds recovery work. And we'll talk about shame and some other topics. And so Jeremy's the perfect one to talk about these things. He's a meditation teacher, a coach, and a porn addiction recovery expert. So it's kind of the perfect package for this topic in particular. Jeremy's created the Unhooked Academy Program with the Unhooked podcast, and has trained as a Buddhist monk in Myanmar. And so I was telling him I'll have to get some training tips in a year or two when I'm ready to go on a retreat or something like that. We were talking about how does one get into this. So, and then as you would imagine, anybody who's got a background like that is also going to be, pursuing high-end academics, right? So genetics and genomics degree on top of it all. I found that there was this really interesting combination. It seems like people are kind of either in the academic world or the spiritual world. Or I shouldn't say it that way. I should say it, you kind of like go deep into either university or a monastery. But somehow you found a way to do both, which is pretty cool. So did I miss anything with the introduction? Anything else that you want to throw out there, Jeremy?
No, I think you nailed it.
Okay, perfect. All right. Okay. Well, so many questions. I'm really curious about your story, but we're going to have to shelve that a little bit because the meat of what we're going to talk about today is mindfulness. And it's become, in psychology, we've really picked it up recently. I mean, it's ancient, right? Thousands of years old. And, all of a sudden we realize that it matters in kind of a scientific and psychological way. And in fact, a lot of addiction programs have really integrated it as well. But a lot of times the way I see it, it's kind of like an add-on or a supplement to it. And I feel like the field is still figuring out how deep this can really go and how vital it is. And in many ways, it's kind of a contrasting philosophy to what has really driven addiction frameworks and so forth. Anyway, so let me get after, how is it that you see recovery and mindfulness coming together, and why are they so important to keep in mind together?
Yeah, well, mindfulness in my eyes is just such an important thing for being a well-rounded human,
Mhm.
for all the different ways that we might want to grow and be wise and compassionate and skillful in our actions. Mindfulness is really about awareness and giving you the choice in how to choose how to live your life. There's this quote that I love. It comes from the work of Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. He was a Holocaust survivor. And he has this quote that comes from his work that says, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is your power to choose your response. And in your response lies your growth and your freedom.
Mhm.
So it's this idea that between something happening and your response, there's actually a space there. But for most people, there's actually, that space is very small and it's more like a reaction. There's a
Mhm.
stimulus and then some immediate reaction, habitual impulse. We just get pulled into it. But in reality, there is a space there. And in that space, we actually have the opportunity to choose how we want to live. So let's say we see some porn pop up, the immediate reaction might be from the primal part of ourself to click on it and to dive in
Mhm.
and to look, right? But we actually have some space there where we can say, is this how I want to live? Do I want to make this decision? And mindfulness gives us access to that space. So that's one of the most important ways, is that it just gives us a choice. We have more awareness of what's going on. A couple other ways. The thing is, for me, mindfulness has so many benefits. And so I couldn't actually, we would be here for an hour if I wanted to tell you about all of the ways it helps.
Right.
But one of the other important ways is that it helps us, a lot of addiction is, it feels like you're getting hijacked. Your
Right.
brain is getting hijacked by this addiction. And on a very neurological sense, that's true. There's something called the amygdala hijack, which is the amygdala, which is the fight, flight, or freeze response, takes over the brain,
Mhm.
down regulates the prefrontal cortex, and just makes us want to fight or run or grasp after something. And mindfulness helps us prevent our brain from getting hijacked. We can actually notice when we're about to get taken over by some strong emotion, whether it's lust or anger or sadness or frustration. It also helps us unhijack the brain once we're hijacked.
Mhm.
So it can actually reactivate the prefrontal cortex. It kind of brings our brain back online when we're hijacked, and can downregulate or the amygdala response. The third way I'll say, and again, this is just one, three in a long list of things. A very important component of mindfulness is something that we call equanimity. And
Mhm.
equanimity is this quality of mind that is grounded, even in the face of something unpleasant. If there's some unpleasant emotion, we don't have to run away from it. And if there's something pleasant in our experience, some sugary delight or porn, we don't have to go grasping after it. We can stay grounded and balanced and centered. And that's a very important component of mindfulness, the equanimity. So those are just a few ways that mindfulness really helps, but it's really just so important for everything.
Yeah, right. Well, exactly. Because, and as we're talking, it's clear that for you, this is a whole lifestyle, and there are so many different principles around mindfulness. Personally, for me, it was one of those things where, I heard about it in grad school, and it was interesting, went on with more like solution oriented kinds of approaches. And then came back to it, kind of in a time of need where like life didn't feel steady. And I was like, okay, let's look into this. And I got some more knowledge and started practicing. Um, and it's interesting because it's one of those things where you just don't stop finding the depths, right? There's always something more to learn out of some of the basic, premises of mindfulness, or by practicing mindfulness, there's always something more that you could observe or, gain insight into. And so, yeah, I really hope that, for our discussion, some viewers have zero knowledge, and this is going to be an intro. And then for some, they're gonna have some experience with mindfulness. And I don't doubt that reviewing and going back over it can really help them find where's the edge that they haven't yet developed with their mindfulness skills. So
Yeah.
with that being said, how does one go about developing this mindfulness, that space in between stimulus and response?
Yeah. In order to answer that, maybe I'll share one more component of why I think mindfulness is so important.
Yeah.
And this is just, it is the foundation of our mind. Like one of the things that really turned me on, as you said, my background is in the sciences, and then I started getting really into spirituality, and it's kind of a blend of these two. And I'd always been a little bit allergic to anything spiritual. I always thought it was a little bit of nonsense and fluffy,
Right.
fluffy stuff. And then I remember reading this book on neuroplasticity and understanding on a very real sense that mindfulness is essentially training the mind in skills that are important for happiness, for fulfillment, for connection. And one of the quotes that really turned me on was this quote that neurons that fire together wire together. And it was the idea that the more frequently we use certain neural pathways, the more frequently we think certain types of thoughts, the stronger those connections become, the stronger those pathways become. And so if we're constantly thinking thoughts of lust or craving or desire, we're in a very real sense strengthening those neural pathways. And they become more and more the habitual neural pathways of the mind. Conversely, we can actually strengthen things like contentment or gratitude or appreciation or patience. Simply by thinking those kinds of thoughts, we strengthen those neural pathways. And so the way to cultivate more mindfulness is to simply practice it, to do it more often. And so to learn it, I mean, there's so many avenues now. There's different meditation apps. You can go and do meditation retreats. As a part of this summit, you get free access to my Mindfulness Made Easy course, which is a 14-day training guide. So there's no excuse these days to not know mindfulness, right? It's like it's everywhere.
It's out there.
But you just have to do it. And you have to practice consistently. Like if you want to be better at playing basketball, you can't just watch a 1-hour video and say, okay, I watched a 1-hour video and now I know how to play basketball. You have to get onto the court and practice and put in the hours. And it's the same with mindfulness. You simply have to sit down and observe what's happening in your experience. And there's so many misconceptions around mindfulness and what it is. A lot of people think it's blocking out your thoughts or achieving this state of complete nirvana. There's so many misconceptions. And this is one of the reasons why I created the course, is to dispel some of those misconceptions. But really, at its core, it's about sitting down and observing your experience. What's happening in your body, what's happening in your mind, and what's happening in the environment around you, and with a particular quality of attention. So it's not just a cold clinical observation. There's a gentle curiosity to your experience. And that's very important because it's actually cultivating some things that we need, like this non-judgmental awareness, the equanimity that I mentioned before.
Yeah, I love that description. I think that we can get caught up in maybe two things. Either we bring awareness to it with that judgment of like, I know, like I'm lusting, it's causing me suffering. I get it, right? And there might be this resistance inherent in how we're observing. And so it's not just taking a look at what's going on, but you're saying, how did you put it? There's a quality to our observation, right? A tone with which we observe. And then with awareness, I think a lot of times, I've had clients in the past that, awareness feels like knowledge. And so again, when they know something, it's like, there's no more curiosity. Like, I got it. It's because of my unmet needs from childhood. And now that's what's causing the cravings or whatever. And then it's like, okay, I figured that inside out. Now what's next? And so a lot of times there's ongoing searching for like new information rather than kind of being in the present moment and kind of really curious about how this moment is showing up and how these needs feel, and so forth. But yeah, I love that emphasis. It's just something that you do it over and over and over again. It's not something that, great, I've achieved awareness. Now, now I can use that knowledge to squash the feelings or something like that.
Yeah. And I want to just pick up on that point that you mentioned around the quality of the non-judgmental awareness, because it's so important that, as you say, a lot of times when we first start bringing some awareness to what's happening, especially around addiction, there can be a lot of self-judgment and self-hatred. Let's say we're seeing some repeating pattern of lust or acting out. And let's say you become aware of lust, and it can be this real judgment of, oh, lust is here again. Oh, I'm such a failure. I'm not meditating correctly. And that just exacerbates the addiction, and it exacerbates the lust. And instead, with mindfulness, I try to coach my clients to get to this place when they notice lust, to just have a very calm, gentle voice saying, oh, there's lust again.
Mhm.
Or, even one of the techniques I like is to say, my old friend lust. It's this very inviting, accepting, open awareness in that makes space for any experience. And ironically, that is one of the things that's been shown to help overcome addiction, is a more accepting approach rather than suppressing the lust or desire or the addiction, to just say, oh, this is here right now. What do I want to do with this energy?
Yeah, absolutely. It feels gutsy because, I think most of us grew up with kind of this notion of like, even my daughter will sometimes like, I don't know. I mean, I suppose she got it from my wife and I, but I don't know that I taught it directly. She's like, please help me not have bad thoughts. For her, of course, she's not thinking sexual at her age. She's thinking more like creepy, scary thoughts from the stories that we, read or that she saw in a book or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's something so natural about that. But what you're describing is like, settling with its presence, like being okay with the fact that lust or fear or whatever it might be is showing up in this moment. And that's a pretty radical departure from our automatic conditioning, I feel like.
1,000%. It is in some ways the most radical thing. And this is why my life changed 180 degrees when I learned about this. Because my whole life I had been chasing after pleasure and running away from pain, running away from anything unpleasant, whether it was an unpleasant body sensation, an unpleasant emotion, and chasing after anything pleasant. And that's in many ways what addiction is I don't want to feel this pain. I want some pleasure to numb me out, right? And that's many people's strategy for life as well. But with mindfulness, it is this radical new strategy of saying, this is just unpleasant. It's just an unpleasant emotion. I don't need to run away from this. I can actually be at peace in this moment, even if there's some sadness, even if there's loneliness. I can just be here with the loneliness. And I can be in the presence of something very pleasant, but I don't have to grasp after it and try to cling to it and have it and achieve it, because both of those states are suffering.
Yeah.
So, as you mentioned earlier, like this is more of a lifestyle for me. 100% it's a lifestyle. It's a lifestyle of noticing where there's suffering and noticing the pathway to fulfillment or to inner peace is through letting go of that grasping and that aversion.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I love that. And in fact, this has been top of brain recently because even this morning I'm drafting up an email and hopefully I'll have it done by my deadline of Wednesday. But at the time of this recording, I'm writing it about the myth or the legend, I guess you could say, of the Buddha and Mara, and how the Buddha achieved enlightenment. And I won't get into the actual story right now, but the essence of the whole myth is this one of being equanimous in the presence of kind of Mara is this figure that more or less kind of represents evil and darkness in the world. And, just as you said that, my old friend, lust or something like that. In many accounts of this myth, the Buddha is just saying, I see you, Mara, right? Like it's kind of this recognizing and there's not resistance, nor is there like kind of playing into the energy that's presented. And so
Yeah.
it's being able to kind of find that immovable place where you can remain while the things are being experienced and you're observing them. So anyway, yeah.
Yeah. And it's such a powerful story. I love that story because it's like Mara sent these, these armies of
Hmm.
violence and also sent these like lovely, beautiful women to
Hmm.
seduce the Buddha. And as you say, the Buddha's just like, I see you. And
Yeah.
once you see it, it doesn't have power over you.
Hmm.
And it's about cultivating that like sanctuary within yourself, that power within yourself.
Hmm.
Because I know one of the things that every man who's addicted to porn deeply wants is inner freedom from the addiction. Not just, okay, I want to create my environment so I never come into contact with porn. I want to be able to go anywhere and not have to worry about what I see because I know that even if there's porn right in front of me, it's not going to tempt me because I have that inner peace within.
Yeah.
That's what we all really want is that inner freedom, not just the outer freedom. And that's
Absolutely.
what this is about, is cultivating that inner freedom.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I'm loving this. Yeah. So, that kind of inner freedom, I agree. I think everyone really wants that. And yet I think a lot of times it is, the banner is taken up. Like I will be so on top of it. I'll be so righteous. I'll be so pure or whatever that those things just won't assail me. And that's
Mhm.
kind of, that's the version that they might look toward. And so the invitation here is like, well, consider what it would be like to, abide in the presence of lust without
Yeah.
necessarily getting hooked, right? And that's going to be a really important
Yeah.
consideration.
And that's just one little tip that we can give people right now is like,
Yeah.
if lust comes up in your experience, it doesn't mean that you're a failed, porn recovery person. Lust will continue to come up. And the question is not like, does it come up or not? It's just, what do you do with it when it does arise?
Hmm.
And does it take control? Does it hijack the bus and start driving for you? Or do you have the presence of mind to notice it and just say, oh, okay, lust is here. How do I want to act on this energy?
Yeah.
Do I want to go down this rabbit hole of opening up Pornhub, or do I want to, sit with this emotion or channel it into the gym or into my career or into my relationship? And so it gets back to that judging yourself thing. I see so many people when they feel something like lust, there's so much self judgment, but just to let go of the judgment and say, oh, okay, this is coming up right now.
Absolutely. Um, well, let me shift this to the experience of shame, because that's kind of what you're talking about right now. Just like,
Hmm.
oh, this thing showed up. And then all of a sudden we assign some meaning to that. That means something like, suck, or, I'm a loser. Why, why would I be susceptible to this? Um, so what are your thoughts on shame? I know you introduced me to a phrase that I don't fully understand yet, which is the two guardians of the world. And so I'm really curious to kind of unpack shame from whatever this might involve.
Yeah. I love this topic of shame because it's both the thing that keeps us trapped in addiction and it's also, the doorway to freedom.
Mm.
Um, and it's such a misunderstood topic that I like diving into it because, we should start off by saying toxic shame is very unhelpful. Toxic shame, this feeling like, oh, I'm broken. If people knew what I did, that they would kick me out of the tribe. That kind of shame, which causes us to isolate, to run away, to act out even more, is one of the things that keeps us trapped in addiction.
Hmm.
And so it's very important. And this is why we can talk later about community and the importance of community. But learning how to let go of toxic shame and let yourself be seen as you are, with all the pros and cons and the faults and everything. And letting go of shame, particularly sexual shame, learning how to embrace sexuality is really important. But at the same time, sometimes shame gets demonized a little too much. And we say, okay, shame is completely bad, let it go. And I find it really interesting in kind of the Buddhist philosophy, there are these things called the two guardians of the world. And so in going back a little bit more, in Buddhist philosophy, a lot of it's just about different mind states and what are some healthy mind states to cultivate and unhealthy mind states that we want to let go of.
Yes.
So these healthy or wholesome mind states, all of them are pleasant. They feel good. So things like love, patience, compassion, equanimity, they actually feel pleasant and they're wholesome for us. And all the unhealthy mind states are unpleasant. So anger, hatred, frustration, they have an unpleasant feeling tone. But there's two exceptions. So there are two wholesome mind states that are good to cultivate, but they feel unpleasant to us. And these are called the two guardians of the world, and they're moral dread and moral shame.
Okay.
So moral dread is this feeling, this fear that if I do this thing, wise people will, judge me or something like that. It's this feeling of this thing, if I do this, bad consequences are going to come. That's moral dread. Moral shame is I've done this unskillful thing, and wise people, will think, lowly of this thing. So that's that moral shame. And in my eyes, it's a healthy shame. So I like to delineate between toxic shame and healthy shame because we need that quality of healthy shame. We need this corrective mechanism to protect us from doing unskillful things. If we've harmed someone and we're feeling the shame of that, we're feeling like, oh, I've done this harmful thing. That is actually a protection. It keeps us from doing it again.
Right.
And so we don't want to throw away that bad feeling. We want to actually learn from it. And we want to say, hey, yeah, I did act unskillfully. And it does feel bad. It feels heavy on my soul that I've acted in this way. And that is a guardian. So those two are the guardians of the world. It keeps us from doing unskillful things. And in her book, Dopamine Nation, have you read Dopamine Nation by Anna Lemke?
No, I've heard of it. I've heard it referenced a lot, but I haven't read it myself.
Yeah. So she's like a Stanford researcher. She studies dopamine, studies addiction. And in the final chapter of the book, she talks about shame as well. And she touches on it in a similar way. She talks about, again, toxic shame versus pro-social shame. And pro-social shame is the kind of shame that we feel in a healthy way, but it makes us still want to connect with other people. So for example, in my Unhooked community or in any kind of men's group, you can actually share something that you're ashamed of, but you can be seen and validated by the people in your community. It's a safe space to share it. And so I just like to emphasize that because a lot of people will throw out shame completely. You go either one extreme or the other. You either completely shame everything. Oh, I'm such a bad person. I can't believe I watch porn. I'm horrible. Or you throw it out completely and say, well, shame is just bad. You shouldn't shame anything. But there is a sweet spot. You want to let go of the toxic shame, but actually use that healthy shame, to say, hey, I actually did do something unskillful. I did do something, that caused harm to myself or to other people. And I want to use that feeling, that, painful feeling to protect myself from doing it again. So those are the two guardians of the world.
I love it. Yeah. Well, anytime we get to add, phraseology like that, I'm down for it. I like that anthropological, the philosophical stuff. But yeah, I think that's really wise. I remember there was a point in my journey where I got kind of my I guess I would say my first round of really taking a look at shame and what that felt like and how it was affecting me. And, very much through a lens of Brene Brown's work, which, I think is actually quite solid. But my initial interpretation was kind of like how I was pursuing lust and unwanted sexual behavior, which was like, okay, the goal is never again, And so let's, toxic shame is bad, just like porn is bad. Let's make sure those don't ever show up again. And, it was not a sustainable mission. So I failed the mission. And her terminology is shame resilience. And so I think there is something much more about like how do we feel that and work through it and come back from that? And it reminds me of like, we really appreciate those people who can call us out on our crap.
Mhm.
And to kind of have that voice, but it's got to have that tone of respect and gentleness. At least for me, and I think for almost everyone. And so it's kind of that fine line between criticizing ourselves, incessantly, which many of us do, and you know, endlessly self-justifying and letting ourselves off the hook, which I think is how many of us start our self-compassion work on accident. But yeah, when we can really find like there's a version of this that's not helpful, but I don't want the whole thing to go away. I want to be able to work with this emotion and allow it to do its thing that it's trying to do with me. So
Yeah.
yeah, framing it as a guardian, I feel like is a really, really important framing. That seems really cool.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned community as part of this. This helps reduce the shame. And what other ways are like community or relationships really important or involved in the recovery process?
Addiction thrives in isolation. It thrives in these dark corners of our soul where we feel broken, we feel alone, and we want to just run away from everyone and not be seen, right? And so if you can be in community, it's one of the most powerful healing things, getting out of that isolation. Because one of the things it does is it helps us heal that shame. Shame is this feeling like I'm broken, and if I'm seen for who I really am, I will be unloved, I will be kicked out. It's related to that imposter syndrome also. So being in community is just really powerful for healing shame. If you're in a type of community, in an intentional community, maybe it's a men's group or support group, where you're actually asked to be authentic, to be vulnerable, to be yourself, to bring the things that scare you, not just to be in community and have this facade of perfection in front of you, but to actually show up fully. And so one of the things it does, it helps you heal that shame and be seen. The other thing, as you mentioned earlier, it's a great place to have people who are wiser than you call you out on your bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
There's almost nothing better than having someone you kind of like respect and look up to just call you out on something and say, hey, I see you doing this thing. What's behind that?
Yeah.
And we need that. We've lost that in many ways in our very secular society. We used to have different kind of rites and rituals and initiations and ways of being held by elders, but we don't have that anymore. And so being in community, finding it somehow in a real community where you are being held accountable and you're being held to that higher standard and you are being mentored is just so powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That kind of accountability is, I don't know. I think, well, I don't know if this is true. I guess I was going to say that's pretty rare these days. And I think it is, but at the same time, I feel like there are numerous, groups associated with this idea of like, hey, we're going to come together, we're going to be real. And so I do think it's accessible. It's something that can be found. But I think kind of our default, we go to high school, we're not going to necessarily find it there. Go to college, we're not necessarily going to find it there. We join the workforce or do whatever we do, not necessarily going to find it there. It can be an easy thing to just never become involved with. And church and community groups like that are often more focused on our aspirations than on our authenticity. And so they can fail to supply that realness that's really showing up. With some important exceptions, that's not always the case, but yeah, that community is a very rich resource for people. So,
and I think you're right. Your initial inclination was right. I think it is very rare in our society to have these spaces. I mean, I think you and I are maybe we live in a little bit of a bubble because we're in this space, and so we're surrounding ourselves by right.
Yeah.
But for the vast majority of society, so much of our culture is pushing people towards show up as perfect, have a beautiful Instagram feed, have a great LinkedIn profile, show
Right.
how amazing you are. Don't show your faults. Don't talk about how you're struggling. And it's very hard for people to find that. And
Yeah.
it's uncomfortable. And I think you have to go against the stream and intentionally seek it out, because it's not going to find you. You have to really put in the effort and put yourself outside your comfort zone to get access to these kinds of communities. And so I think it is very rare to have that accountability. And accountability is so valuable in recovery. In some ways, I'd say it's more valuable than mindfulness or anything else. It's like being held accountable by other people it's one of the biggest missing things for anyone out there who's listening who says they've tried quitting porn and they just can't. You
Right.
got to first ask yourself, are you getting accountability? Because doing this by yourself is just so challenging.
Yeah.
And if you can get accountability and just be in some kind of group or support group, it's a huge benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done various versions of this work throughout different seasons of my career. And, I feel like, those group spaces where people can come, and sometimes my favorite groups were the ones where we were just starting off and nobody knew each other, super awkward, right? And everybody's just like, okay, well, we all know why we're all here, you know, but, and then there, almost always there's just one person who's like, you know, okay, I'm like, guys, here's my story, right? But, if I'm going to do this thing, here's what, you're going to be working with me in this group, and they'll share their story. And then everybody else starts to kind of like thaw out. And it's just like,
Mhm.
oh, we can do that here. Like we can be real. And then somebody, naturally they're all going to give props to the guy. They're going to really love his vulnerability. And when that kind of culture can really gel, it makes such a big difference. And so, it's an important reflection point of like, do I have people I can show up with and share my reality with in a way
Mm.
that both offers support and that accountability both? And, that can be um, hard to find and well worth the effort to seek it out. So,
And that's the perfect combination. It's like you can have the vulnerability or you can have the accountability. Sometimes you don't have them together, and that's
yeah,
tough. But if you bring them together, a space where you can be real and be vulnerable and talk about what's really going on, and at the same time have a community of brothers or, whatever group you're in that is going to hold you to that higher standard and say, hey, I see you and I know you're struggling and I know you've got this and I know you can step up and that you can live in a healthy way. And to have people like that champion you and believe in you, that combination of the two of those things is really powerful.
yeah, well put. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it can get imbalanced sometimes, and I think sometimes those groups end up kind of keeping us where we're at if we're not involved in both sides of it. So
Mhm.
cool. All right. Well, so I want to talk about your course, but before I do, any other ideas on mindfulness, shame, community, or anything that we missed that you wanted to throw out there? Could be that we covered it all. I don't know.
I know we didn't cover it all because I feel like you and I could probably talk for 6 hours. I'm just trying to think if there's anything like really important. I think just the most important thing, and you probably cover this all the time, in your podcast or, your series, is just really understanding that if you're out there with an unwanted porn use habit or porn addiction, whatever level it's at for you, like you're not broken. And it's part of being human. Like we are sexual beings. Like we have this part of who we are, which is so beautiful. And it's something we don't want to give up. And I think relates to letting go of sexual shame and embracing a healthy sexuality is to not shun your sexuality and to not think that it makes you broken or wrong. It's actually a beautiful part of being human and being alive. And so, of course, lust and desire is going to come up, and it's not a problem. There's no indication that, okay, therefore I'm broken. It's just,
Right.
are you engaging with it in a healthy and skillful way? That's the real question. Not,
Yeah.
I shouldn't have this. I need to suppress it and repress it and push it down. It's, okay, this is an energy that's powerful. How do I want to use this skillfully? How do I want to use this to bring more joy and harmony and love and fun to my life and to the lives of people around me?
Yeah.
And that's the real question, not like bad versus good. It's skillful versus unskillful.
Yeah.
So that's I guess the final thing I'll say.
Cool. I love that. Yeah. That terminology specifically has been really, that's what I love about Buddhist thought in many regards. Just, trained mind, untrained mind, skillful versus unskillful. Those are very different things than, good or bad. And it gives us a little bit of like much more of a foothold to start gaining access with. So,
and more breathing room. Like if it's just good or bad, then it's like the moment you do something, like quote unquote bad, it's just like, oh, I'm a bad person.
Yeah.
But if it's skillful versus unskillful, it gives you more breathing room of like, oh, I'm on a journey. Like I'm training my mind to be more skillful.
Yeah.
I'm training my heart to live with more skill and wholesomeness.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. All right. Well, so plenty for viewers to reflect on and take action on. And specifically as a follow-up, you've included in the all access implementation bundle, Mindfulness Made Easy. Can you share a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah. So this is a 14-day training guide for learning the fundamentals of mindfulness meditation. And I created it because there are so many misconceptions. I spent over a decade teaching meditation. I spent time as a Buddhist monk and have a very secular scientific background. So I feel like I brought together those two in a really nice way.
Mm-hmm.
And what this course does is every day there is a short explainer, somewhere around 5 minutes of explaining a new concept of mindfulness. And then there's a roughly 5 to 10 minute guided meditation. So each day you can learn a little new concept in mindfulness and then practice it in a guided meditation. And it takes you step by step to mastering the fundamentals. And so every day you can just watch one module and you really learn how to practice by yourself, so that by the end of the course, you can actually just sit down on your couch and practice on your own. You don't need a guided meditation every time you want to meditate.
Yeah.
And so that's really what the course is about.
Cool. I love that. Yeah. And hopefully by now you guys are seeing just how valuable that really is, that ability to sit with our own minds, bodies, environment, and bring non-judgmental presence to it. So cool. Obviously strong recommendation to check that out. So, all right, Jeremy, it's been a blast. I'm sure we'll have to stay in touch and get some Myanmar travel tips or something like that down the road. So we'll see.
Definitely.
But appreciate the comments on mindfulness. Again, viewers, pull one thing at least out of this that you can implement on, and definitely give that course a strong consideration. That would be an excellent way to spend the next 2 weeks. So, okay. All right, we'll close out there. Thanks again, Jeremy.
Thank you.